Chairman, you can start the meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this virtual meeting of Cornwall Council's Audit Committee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. As I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken by using the raise your hand function and the result announced by the Democratic Services Officer. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting, it is that committee members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by putting an X in the chat box. Okay. Before we start today's business, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm members and officers' attendance, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now call your name. Please confirm your name followed by your electoral division. Councillor Harris.
David Harris, Truro Trehaven.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
Councillor Desmond, Poole and Tahidi division.
Thank you. Councillor Ekin-Smith. Councillor Ekin-Smith, you're on mute. Councillor Ekin-Smith, I think you're on mute still. If you could unmute.
It keeps muting itself. There we are. David Egan-Smith, 11.
Thank you. And Councillor Kenny.
Same trick, it's muting itself. Joanna Kenny, Newquay Pentire, good morning.
Thank you. And Councillor LeBroy.
Good morning, Peter LeBroy, Bude Division.
Thank you. And Councillor Biscoe.
Biscoe, Busgowan, Truro.
Thank you. And Councillor Wood.
John Wood, Roach Division.
Thank you. And the co-optees, Jeff Ring.
Good morning, Jeff Ring, Independent Rate Member.
Thank you. And Chris Butters.
Yeah, Chris Butters, good morning.
Thank you. We have two other councillors joining us today. Councillor Mike Ethorne-Gibbons.
Good morning, Mike Ethorne-Gibbons, Laddox, St Clement and St Erms.
Thank you. And Councillor Taylor.
Good morning, Councillor Taylor, Carpus-Bainley, Lance.
Oh yeah, be there in a minute.
Chairman.
If members, you could put your microphones on mute, and I will now list the officers present.
Helen, I think we missed a committee member. Mr. Councillor Hurd.
I beg your pardon. Councillor Hurd.
Good morning. John Hurd, Camden Pen Darvish.
Thank you.
We also
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, Barry Jordan, Tintagel Division. I'm sorry, I had to leave for a second, so I might have missed you, so I apologise.
That's okay. So the officers present we have today are Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit and Risk Assurance, Gary Walton, Principal Audit Manager, Jason Kahn, Principal Audit Manager, Chris Chandler, Principal Auditor, Nellie Sullivan, Service Director Assurance and Monitoring Officer, Tracy Langley, Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer. Russell Ashman, Professional Lead Pensions and Treasury, Finance and Commercial and Deputy 151 Officer. And myself, Helen Snell, Democratic Services Officer. We have from Grant Thornton, Jerry Daly, Lead Auditor, and Paul Dossett, Partner. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We can carry on with the agenda. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I think we're all here. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. May I ask, are there any declarations of interest? I will take silence as there being none. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 31st of January 2020, which seems like a different age completely. Let's go through the minutes. We're going to the minutes for accuracy, please. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Are there any questions on the minutes or as to their accuracy? In which case, may I please ask for a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes? Councillors LeBroy and I think Jordan, in that order, were the proposer and seconder, and I'm grateful to us putting their hands up as well. We now, Helen, go to the vote. Helen, do you want to conduct the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So to confirm, we've got proposer Councillor LeBroy and the seconder Councillor Jordan. So I can confirm that we are going to vote using the hands function. All hands are down at present. So members, could you please raise your hand if you are for the proposal?
We all done?
2 more to go, Chairman. I'm having to tick them off individually. So I can confirm, Chairman, that all 9 members have voted and all 9 members have voted for.
Thank you. The motion is therefore carried. Agenda item 4, the external audit plan. Who is going to talk about this, please?
Chair, it's me, Geraldine from Grant Thornton.
Thank you.
So thank you, Audit Committee. Can I ask you to turn to the introduction and headlines page of the audit plan, please? And just to draw out some key messages for 1920 audit work. The plan you'll see in front of you is very similar to plans that I've presented in the past. However, as you will see on the introduction and headlines page, we've added one financial statements risk. I guess it doesn't come as any surprise that we will be focusing on the impact of COVID-19 in terms of the preparation of the accounts and any technical adjustments that are required, but also it features very heavily in terms of our value for money work and us focusing on the impact of COVID-19 in terms of expenditure, but actually probably more importantly to Cornwall, the income aspect of it as well. So I'll come on to that when I present the value for money section. There's another key change from previous years, and that's around our materiality. We've discussed a lot over the past couple of years the impact of increased regulation on the audit sector, and indeed the public sector is exactly the same as in the commercial sector. So in answer to some challenges by our regulators, the firm has decided to reduce its threshold in terms of materiality. So in the past, you would have seen materiality way over 20 million for the main council audit, and similarly for the pension fund. In response to those challenges, we've now, as a firm, reduced our materiality. So the important thing for Cornwall Council this year in 1920 is that materiality will be set at 18.5 million. That then has an impact in terms of the amount of testing we do, and also has an impact in terms of some of the other areas that we may never have had coming into that threshold before, having to be audited. And we'll know that next week in more clarity when we get the draft financial statements. Just turning over the page then, in terms of the key matters impacting on our audit. I've already mentioned COVID-19 and the environment that we are working currently. Just to explain to members that the audit will continue to be done remotely. We've finished off our interim audit work remotely, and indeed, right at this present time, the team are working on the pension fund audit, and that has been done entirely remotely over the course of June. That brings its challenges. It absolutely does bring its challenges, not only for us as a team, but also for your finance department. And we continue to work very closely with Russell and his team and Tracy to make sure that we do understand exactly what we need, and we're trying to work together to make sure that there are no delays in terms of having to work remotely. But just to note that that is a challenging environment at the moment. In terms of the wider economy then, and you'll see in the value for money section, we will continue to focus on the council's financial sustainability, the medium-term financial planning, and all the work that has been going on in the early part of this year to review your finances by the programme of work that Tracy has been doing since January. And I also mentioned the impact of COVID-19, so that will feature quite heavily in terms of any impact on expenditure and income. And finally, as part of our value for money work, we are also going to look at the arrangements in terms of the Treveth LLP setup. It has been quite a significant thing that the council have done over the last 6 months. And so therefore we'll be looking at the governance arrangements in terms of that setup of that particular company and organisation. Just moving over the page then in terms of any technical matters, I'm not going to necessarily talk in detail about the technical matters, but I will just highlight some of the key areas in terms of our audit focus. So one, it will come as no surprise, heavy focus in terms of valuation of your assets. Clearly, this is unprecedented times. We know that around the country, valuers are looking at year-end balances and thinking about the impact on those balances in terms of COVID-19. So there'll be a heavy focus on valuation of assets. It's a significant estimate within your accounts, as you know, and you know that we've done a lot of work in that in the past. We will look at the Tamar Bridge. The council are actually in the process of having the Tamar Bridge completely revalued this year, because it's time for that to be revalued, as well as all your housing stock as well. So those, I guess, are the key messages in terms of valuation. We will focus on the valuation of investments as well, because again, there may be some impact in relation to COVID-19. And then, as we always do, focus on pension fund and the pension fund liability in particular. So there's nothing technical that's emerging this year, just to reinforce the message that as auditors we will continue to focus on some of those very large estimates within your accounts. And just moving over the page then, as you know, we are also the group auditor, and so we continue to be in discussion with the subsidiary auditor, Bishop Fleming. We've had some really good meetings with them over the last 9-10 months. We've issued them instructions and talked to them about the kind of testing that we would expect them to be doing in terms of our view on the group. I think the important one to pick up and probably highlight, because this audit plan was produced in April and unfortunately the meeting was cancelled, but is Cornwall Airport. So on the audit plan, you will see that normally what we will do with Cornwall Airport, because it's a small subsidiary of yours, we will just focus on variances year in, year out. However, the change this year will be around the going concern element of the airport, given obviously all the things that have happened over the last 5-6 months, not just COVID-19. And so we have actually instructed Bishop Fleming to liaise with us directly on any work that they are doing at the moment in terms of going concern of the airport. And we expect to have their report with us by the end of July, early August, depending on if they obviously have any delays in their audit work. But just to reassure audit committee members, the liaison between the two sets of auditors is ongoing and will continue to carry on right up until we actually sign the opinion on your group. So I'm happy to take any questions in terms of the financial statements work before I come on to some of the more detail on value for money, Chair, if that's best, or would you like me to carry on with value for money?
No, let's take questions now. I can see one cross. Councillor Jordan, you have a question?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. On page 19 or 2, key matters impacting our audit, it says as a large unitary authority, your accounts are often complex and technically challenging. Over the past few years, we've worked you to understand the technical issues in relation to group accounting, asset transfers from central government and complex financial instruments. Is this different to every other unitary authority of the country, or is Cornwall unique in the way it does things? And if so, why? Thank you.
Councillor, I'll answer your question, and then perhaps Paul Dossett, who's obviously our local government lead, may be able to come in and give you more of a perspective nationally. I would say this, wouldn't I? Yes, I do believe that Cornwall is quite unique and it's also quite complex. You are an extremely large unitary authority. And if you think about some of the things that you've been doing and trying to do over the last 5, 6, 7 years that I've been with you, there are some unique things in there. You know, dare I mention the Wave Hub, all the group and the subsidiaries that you have initiated and introduced. There are some complex accounting. I'm not going to go into in much detail, but financial instruments in particular, we have, for instance, the LOBOs on the agenda right at the end, and we all know about the complexities of those. So some of the transactions that you do enter into are highly complex, and therefore they do require a degree of certain risk assessment by the auditors, but also heavy focus on some of those very, very big numbers. I don't know if Paul wants to say anything about the national picture.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that all large councils are complex without fail. There's no doubt about that. Jodie just discussed some of the specifics about Cornwall, but all large councils are complicated. And just touching back on the regulatory point that Jodie made, all large councils are in the remit of the FRC, and you'll see lots of references to them in our various documents, and therefore require a huge amount of scrutiny by auditors. So you're absolutely in that pack. And obviously you are one of the larger councils in the country. So the larger the unitary authority is, the more complex some of its transactions are, the heavier the audit focus naturally will be there. So yes, you are unique in your own way, but you're very similar to many other very large councils.
Thank you. Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question, if I could, concerning your report on page 22. And that relates to the valuation of land and buildings. You mentioned that in your presentation, and it's good to see you again, Jerry. Hi.
Hi.
What I wanted to know was this: will you be assessing the Cornwall Council properties, that's their lands and buildings, to ensure they're properly valued where Cormac is a tenant and they do not pay any or pay unreasonably low comparative commercial rents? And the second part of the question is this: will you be seeking assurance that the value of the properties occupied by Cormac have their value protected through appropriate care and maintenance by the Cormac tenants?
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. Apologies, in terms of your complete portfolio of assets and buildings in particular, I think is what you're referring to. Off the top of my head, I don't know which ones Cormac occupy. But certainly in terms of the valuation process, as we've just said, this is a huge exercise for us. It's also a huge exercise for the council, and we've been working very closely with officers, in particular your valuer, over the last couple of years to make sure that the remit in terms of what is valued every year is increased. So that's as much as I can say at the moment. I don't know if that falls within our, say for instance, our sampling, etc. But I'm more than happy to have a look at the list and the portfolio to see if those particular assets fall within that remit.
Thank
you for that. If I could just follow up on that. For your information, the internal floor area of the buildings occupied by Cormac amount to just over 20,000 square meters, and the total area of the land that they occupy in one form or another is 453,500 square meters. So we're talking about a very substantial part of our property portfolio as a council, which is held by and occupied by Cormac. And I think that if their valuation is to have real meaning, it has to be one of the top priorities of your valuation process. Would you agree?
I think, Councillor, clearly we'll take that into account. The other thing I would just add to that is that this year, at all large councils, we are engaging our own valuer to look at the work of your valuer. So matters such as that can be reflected in that process as well. So we can say, when you're right, it is a reasonably large footprint, and we can reflect that in our discussions with our own valuer as well as look in their work to look at the work of your valuer.
Thank you, Paul. Can I move on? Councillor Biscoe.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to come up quite so quickly. Somewhere in these papers, Jerry, I think that I read something about housing stock being transferred to Trevelle. I'm not quite sure which housing stock. I sincerely hope it's not the HRA housing stock. But that's part of my question. But my other part of the question, which comes back to these papers, is that in the valuation of the HRA, the council housing stock, clearly that valuation is affected by council house sales, the pernicious sale of council houses, and because I'm not sure what rules apply to the receipts from council house sales now, whether we can retain them all or whether they're still nicked by the government for their own nefarious purposes. But it seems to me to present something of a difficulty in valuing the estate. And as I understand the reason for valuing the estate, it is in order to ensure that any borrowing that's undertaken against the HRA sits within the asset, is containable by from within the asset value and the revenue generation from it. And I'm just interested to know how you as auditors treat the impact of the loss of value by council house sales on the HRA, and whether you consider that any increase in value because prices go up is actually offset by any increase in value in the overall estate offsets the loss of council house sales, and whether actually in persisting with council house sales we are actually undermining our own ability to be able to adequately maintain and properly develop property within the HRA, both by keeping up what we've got and by extending the scope of the estate.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a bit of a long-winded and several-headed question.
Councillor Biscoe, I think that's probably a question better directed at officers, actually, because I think some of those are about the council's processes and the capital receipts regime, which we do know about, but I would have thought, at least initially, officers would probably be best placed to answer that question.
I would have thought that the effect, the way in which we set about treating in terms of value, the loss of value by council house sales, and the way that that value accumulates to housing stock as time goes by, as I assume, how we balance those two things off, and whether we're doing that correct. I would have thought that was an area of study for for an auditor. Forgive me if I'm wrong.
Well, perhaps if officers will come in first, and then we can follow up after that, Councillor.
So Tracy, do you want to come in and comment on that specifically?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. You're right, the council house sales from the HRA create a receipt in the HRA. However, we are required to give some of that back to the government. So in terms of rebuilding stock, the HRA doesn't have as much as it did have from the receipt in order to replenish. However, there have been some movement on the borrowing rates for the HRA. So we are able to utilise borrowing in order to build that capacity in our social stock. In terms of your first question, which was, is social stock being transferred to Treveth? No, the answer is it isn't. So social stock is kept in the HRA. Treveth is there to provide other tenures of housing, which are outside of the HRA and include sales. So it is really complicated, and of course trying to replenish council stock with a dwindling capital receipt is difficult, but we're trying our hardest to make sure that we take advantage of lower PWLB rates.
Yeah. So Tracy, the other part of my question was does the loss of value get offset by the increase in value over time of the HRA, and so is it essentially sustaining itself in terms of value, because the value of the HRA is what we borrow against, is it not?
Sorry, but can I interrupt? I think we're liable to get slightly off the agenda point here. If you can perhaps take that offline.
We'll take that offline, and it's a little bit more complicated than that, and Russell will be able to help us.
Very complicated. So can I just ask one question, not so much for my benefit, but the benefit of anybody else watching on the webcam. Jerry, you mentioned materiality. Will you just explain what you mean by materiality in terms of what you look at and don't look at, please?
Okay, I'll try, Councillor. So materiality is the threshold that an auditor will apply in terms of their opinion. So you get a lot of reference to materiality. It's the benchmark we use as professionals to determine whether your accounts are true and fair. And it's applied in terms of gross expenditure and as a percentage that we apply. Okay, so that's where materiality sits in our world. If we found something that was material, i.e. 17 million for you, 18.5 for the group, we would be saying to officers that is an error, and you probably need to think about adjusting your accounts, because anything over that threshold doesn't represent true and fair to us as auditors. So that's how it's applied, that's where it comes from, that's what it means. In terms of when we're scoping our work and the risk assessment that we do, there's a lot of factors in there. We talked about you as an individual authority, we always factor that in. But what we will do when we get your draft financial statements is we will review all your figures in there, and anything that is above that threshold, we will start to consider focus and attention and testing in that particular area. So I think, Councillor Harris, what I was trying to say was, given the impact and the fact that our materiality has come down, I would say quite significantly this year than any other year in the past, there may be things that, and I don't know until next week, but there may be things in there that will fall into the category that will need to be tested. So when we come back to you, we will be able to say we've looked at everything that is material, i.e. above that threshold.
Okay, thank you. All right, do you want to move on to value for money now, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just turning to page 27, I've given you some of the key summary and highlighted messages in terms of what we're going to look at in value for money. As we have done in previous years, we will focus on financial sustainability. And I think this probably then is quite closely related to the third area, which is COVID-19. As I say, this was written in April, and clearly there has been significant impact as the months go on. And indeed, central government are talking about funding for local government. It's in the news this morning, and what we're going to do with that. So just focusing on your medium-term financial planning, for instance, in terms of the delivering your savings, you continue to be on that trajectory and have been doing so for the last 4 or 5 years. So again, we will continue to focus on how that delivery is taking place. I mean, clearly there has been challenges and there continues to be challenges around adult social care. And I know that there is quite an in-depth review and work ongoing in that particular area. So we will continue to liaise and find out the process and progress on that. And then finally, around the medium-term financial plan, you know, what is the focus now that we're in a different world, and how is that going to be refreshed? The establishment of Treveth LLP is quite a big item that you've entered into over, as I say, the last 6-10 months. And we will be focusing on arrangements in terms of governance and the structure of the governance arrangements. So if we think about the responsibilities of the council, what are your responsibilities in terms of setting up that particular organisation and agreement and arrangement? And it will be focusing on the governance. We're not going to be going into detail around the actual implementation process. It is just checking that the council has abided by its statutory powers. So it's around governance. And then finally, as I've mentioned quite a lot in this presentation, focus on COVID-19, particularly around expenditure and the many things that you as an authority have had to do over the last 2 months in terms of business rates, council tax, grants, etc. It's been quite a challenge for you and for everybody with the extra responsibilities that you have been given. But then again, also importantly, loss of income in terms of car parking, etc. So we'd like to focus on the income side just as much as the expenditure side. We're obviously quite aware that the council continue to make returns to central government and have received funding from central government, just like a lot of authorities across the country. I think in terms of members' expectations, therefore, we're now at the end of June. We're going to keep looking at this right up until the point that we issue the opinion, because clearly every day is a different day in the COVID-19 world.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on that? I was very straightforward. I've got one slight question. When you say you'll be looking at the medium-term financial plan, presumably you'll be looking at that as revised in the light of various movements, COVID-19, etc.
Yes, Councillor Harris, it will be as it's revised, and you know, we'll continue to liaise with Tracy and the team, because I know that it continues to emerge on an ongoing basis, and there's a lot of work going into this at the moment. So it will be the latest revised version, the real one that's happening at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Biscoe.
Chairman, if I might ask, with regard to the governance of Treveth, are you going to? It seems to me that the question about the governance of Treveth is not so much about the governance of the company itself, but the relationship between the shareholder and the company, and the degree to which the shareholder, being a democratic institution, actually makes known in a transparent and accountable way the interests and the concerns and indeed the delights of the shareholder in relation to the performance of the company, so that the whole of the shareholder institution is actually involved in the shareholding, as opposed to one person buried away in a little laptop somewhere in the corner of somebody's living room, as it were.
Councillor, that's a good question. Certainly from our point of view, we would absolutely be looking at the arrangements in place at council level for scrutiny and accountability, and our lessons from other councils where perhaps that hasn't been as good as it should have been are actually quite prevalent at the moment. So if you look at, for example, the Bristol Energy Company, you look at the Nottingham Energy Company, both good examples where transparency, accountability, understanding of the business were not as good as they could have been at council level. So these are things that are very important to us as auditors. So that will absolutely be one area of focus that we'll be considering, recognising, of course, recognising, of course, that Treveth is in its early days and it's not an established arrangement with a track record or not of performance, and that's quite important. But it's important, I think, to make sure that from the start, proper scrutiny and governance arrangements are in place,
yes,
and therefore they should be able to address some of the challenges that may come down the track.
Yes, and so therefore, if I may, Chairman, because in your little list of things that we should all be doing, the word reporting seems to me to be incredibly important. That the shareholder, the company should be reporting to the shareholder, and the people who are engaged in the shareholding should be obliged to report to the people who actually do the governance of the institution, the shareholder itself. And it's the reports and the nature of the reports, the scope of the reports and the quality of the reports, I think, which is really important.
Sorry, Councillor Biscoe, you're on a subject here that I think you know well is dear to my heart as well. And I'm going to be intrigued to see what GT say about the way reporting comes back to councillors and not to individuals within the cabinet or whatever. I think the point's very well made, and I look forward to seeing GT's comments.
No, of course, as you know, Chairman, I do like to keep your heart beating regularly.
You've done very well, Councillor Biscoe, thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? All right, are you done, Jerry?
So thank you, Chair. I think I'm done. All I would do is refer you to page 31, which is around audit fees. Paul's going to take the next papers around audit fees, changes to audit fees. There's a lot of mention of audit fees in our papers. So I'm finished unless there's any other questions.
Okay, do audit fees come in agenda item 5, or are they still in this agenda item here? I think they actually come into the next agenda item.
That's exactly right, Councillor. So we do have to be transparent in terms of putting our audit fee in your plan, but there is a letter obviously that has been sent talking in more detail around fees.
So in respect of agenda item 4, we can move to the recommendation, which is remarkably bland. Recommendation is that the committee considers the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2020, raising any issues, questions or areas for clarification with the council's external auditors as appropriate. I hardly feel we need to vote on it, but I think Helen will tell us we should do, in which case, Helen, please conduct the vote.
Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Thank you, Chairman. Could I have a hand up, please, for a proposer? We have a proposer, Councillor Hurd. Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please?
Sorry, Chair, I think we need to change the recommendation. Because the recommendation has all the blurb about how we're going to consult. Well, shouldn't it just be full stop after the first few words?
Sorry. So Councillor Kenny, may I suggest it's better changed to the committee notes, because that's what we've done. We noted it and questioned it. If you substitute the word for notes for considers, would that deal with your point?
I'm not sure it does, because all this business about makes recommendations, blah, 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 blah. Surely it's just the committee notes the report.
Hang on, we're on the external audit plan.
Yeah.
So what are you suggesting?
That the committee, the recommendation is. Am I on the right agenda item? First of all, is it agenda 5 recommendation we're talking about? No,
it's agenda 4. That's why I'm questioning it.
I'm whizzing back to agenda 4. Beg your pardon, Councillor. I think I'd have done better to do it online. I just think it's too wordy. All we're doing is we're noting the external audit plan.
So in that case, can I just simply suggest, and thank you for raising it, that we change that 4th word. The recommendation, the committee notes the external audit plan.
Full stop. Yes.
Yes, I'll be quite happy with that. The recommendation becomes that the committee notes the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2020. The minutes will show that we've raised issues, questions, etc. And all we've been asked to do formally is note the plan. And
I'll second that.
We've got any comments on that? Do we need a revised proposal and seconder?
I will continue to propose that. Councillor Hurd here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen Snell, Democratic Services. So we have the proposal as read by Councillor Harris that the committee notes the external audit plan for the year ending 31st of March 2020. Our original and the proposer is Councillor Hurd. Can I have a hands up for a seconder? Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor Kenny. So if members could all make sure their hands are down, please, before we go to the vote. I can confirm that all hands are down. So now, can you raise your hands if you are for the proposal? Thank you. I have 8 members' hands up. Councillor Desmond, are you not voting for the? So we have 8 votes for. If you can all put your hands down, please. And I confirm all hands are lowered. Please, could you raise your hand if you are against the proposal? I can confirm there are no hands up. So, and please could you raise your hand for any abstentions? I confirm there are no abstentions, so that's carried with 8 votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we move on? Can we move on, please, to agenda item 5? Because that's left me worrying that the audit committee can't get 8 + 1 or 8 + 0 to equal 9. Agenda item 5, external audit progress report, fee letter and Cornwall pension fund. Who's going to take this item forward, please?
I am Councillor Harris. Thank you. So there's three items to this agenda item. First of all is the progress report. The progress report just reflects that we have commenced our interim work, and we've done a lot of our planning and interim work at the council earlier part of this year. And in the progress report as well, there's some background information on the sector, the local government sector, some of the issues facing that, and the regulatory audit arrangements as well. So on the progress report, I didn't have anything further to say, and happy to take any questions on the progress report, and then I'll come on to the other 2 items after that.
Any questions at this stage? Thank you. Please carry on, Paul.
Thank you. Next item is the 1920 fee letter. And
sorry, Paul, can I just interrupt you, because I've seen the message that Councillor Desmond seems to have fallen off. Helen, do we need to adjourn for 2 minutes to try and get him back?
Councillor Desmond, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I've just come back online. I had a total crash. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Councillor Desmond.
Oh, good. Okay. Right, sorry, Paul, can you carry on?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Total crash. I'm back again. Apologise for the technology.
Can you carry on there, Phil?
So, yeah. The next item was the fee letter for 1920, and the key thing about the fee letter is it's a vehicle for delivering a lot more detail than the audit plan in terms of the reasons for fee variations, additional fees this year. driven by the regulatory environment we're in. And for those members who don't spend their time keeping up to date with the audit regulatory environment, due to many of the quite big sort of news stories about BHS, Patisserie Valerie, there's a whole range of big news stories about audit issues. The FRC, who are the regulator of audit firms, have very much upped their game in terms of what they expect auditors to do in public and private sector. And the public sector, and Geraldine made reference to these things in the plan, the particular focus on asset valuations, the particular focus on pension liabilities. The reason that they're particularly interested in those areas are because they are large numbers in your accounts, and they are estimates. They are not transactional figures, they are estimate figures. So somebody in management, and obviously management in this case is the advice you take from valuers and actuaries, has estimated a figure. And therefore the FRC are very keen to see that auditors spend an awful lot of time looking at that. And just to give you a feel for the FRC's approach on this, we've had they review half a dozen audits a year, just to understand, just to sort of check on the performance of individual firms. And we've had 6 reviews in respect of 18-19, which are nearly complete. And their conclusion, not their conclusion, but their a theme they always have is on asset valuations. So every one of those reviews has some additional thing on asset valuations that the auditor needs to do more of in future years, even though in 18-19, both at Cornwall and other audits, we spent a huge amount of time on asset valuations anyway. So that has driven a sort of additional input into audit. I would estimate, based on my sort of experience and knowledge around the country, we have probably put in 20 to 30% more time into audits than in previous years. And the item that Geraldine focused on materiality alone, on itself, adds considerable time because we have to test more transactions. So the fee letter really tries to set out the regime we're existing in and what the FRC expects of us. And so that's why you'll see those additional items in that. So I'm conscious members may have questions on that. So Councillor Harris, I'm happy to stop there and take any questions members have.
Thank you. Actually, rather than go to members first, I'm still slightly off kilt here. And ask our 151 officer if she has any comments first, please. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just putting my bits on. No, I don't have any comments. I've been talking with our external auditors about putting these together. So.
Okay. I mean, I will just comment very quickly. I hate audit fees. I hate fees going up. I hate professional fees full stop. These look quite reasonable, and I think the explanation is quite reasonable. But are there any questions from members, please? Excellent. Can we move to recommendation? And I think, and credit to Councillor Kenny, I think again we just need to change this recommendation. I would suggest we change it to that the committee notes the audit progress report, the audit fee letter, and the Cornwall Council Pension Fund plan, full stop. We've had our clarification, we've had our chance to raise our question. So if I can suggest the recommendation is changed like that, and Helen, are you happy you've got those words?
Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Yes, thank you, Councillor Harris. So we can go with that amended recommendation to the vote, please. Could I have a hand raised? I confirm all hands are down. Could I have a hand raised for a proposer, please?
Councillor Kenny and Councillor Biscoe, thank you.
So was that Councillor Kenny was first?
Proposer Councillor Biscoe was the seconder, thank you.
Yeah. And a seconder for Councillor Biscoe. Thank you, members. If you could lower your hands, please. I confirm all hands are lowered. Could I now have a raise of hands if you are for the proposal? Thank you. I have a show of 8 hands. Councillor Desmond, you're... Okay, thank you. I have a show of 9 hands. I can confirm that all 9 members have voted for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we move on therefore to agenda item 6? And I'm going to propose that after this item, we take a 10-minute comfort break or whatever, because certainly the room I'm sitting in is getting sweltering iron to escape. So if we take agenda item 6, which is going to be fairly short, I hope, who will speak to this item?
Me, Councillor.
Please carry on.
Thank you, Chair. So agenda item 6 is the closure of the last 4 years' audits as a result of us concluding the 2 objections we received on your logos way back in August 2016. So when I presented the audit findings report to you at the end of last year, you would have seen a series of recommendations to management and indeed members regarding arrangements on borrowing that came out of the conclusion of our objection work over the last 3.5 years. But statutorily, we cannot close or certify the closure of an audit if work is ongoing in terms of an objection. So the papers you have in front of you here are the certificates closing off 15-16, 16-17, 17-18 and 18-19, which means in 19-20 we can start afresh. So this is really for information. What I would do, however, is draw your attention back to the progress report, which mentions the fee for the objection work, which I don't think, Councillor Harris, we have mentioned specifically yet. So you've looked at the fee for 1920, you've agreed the fee for 1920, you've also just agreed the additional fees for 18-19. But in terms of transparency, I just want to make sure that members are aware of the cost of the objection work over the last 3.5 years. That is on page 46 of the progress report. So the fee that we are proposing and indeed that we have incurred is 62,500 for those 3.5 years work. That includes members, 12,500 of legal fees. So we had to consult clearly with our own legal advisors. And the interesting point here is, although you have now got a contract directly with Grant Thornton, at the time in 15-16 you were under the PSAA regime. So there's a couple of things just to note. You need to be aware of the fee, but also need to be aware that once you have agreed it, PSAA will have to agree it as well. So they know about this, we've provided them with the information. It's just clearly making sure that members of the audit committee are aware as well. As I say, PSAA will have the final say in terms of that audit fee because it's your previous regime, not the one that you're in now.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Biscoe has his hand or next in the box to raise a question. Councillor Biscoe.
Chairman, by the time we've taken into account the size of the fee, which I perfectly understand, and I'm not complaining about Grant Thornton's fee, it seems to me to be perfectly reasonable given the scale of the work that you've had to undertake in order to do this. but also there will have been costs accruing to the council as we supply you with the information you need and so on. And actually, if you add it all up, it turns into quite a sizable bill. And we are coming back to the fact that we've had 4 years accounts held up for, well, held up whilst we get to the bottom of these complaints. Now, one could argue that a question raised on accounts is a valuable thing to do, and one could argue that as a result of that we've actually sorted out an ongoing systemic problem, and that maybe it is a substantive question and was well worth asking, in which case the cost of finding the answer may well be worth it. But then there's also the question of whether it is worth it or not, and whether there's a way of evaluating that and maybe recouping from some source some of the cost of this question having been asked. Now, I ask that not simply specifically in relation to this question, which is, in my experience, is the biggest question that I've seen asked in audit in at least 20 years. But whether in general terms, if a question is raised which causes a substantive body of work to be undertaken, whether there is some measure whereby we can consider recouping at least some of the costs. Some questions may be as difficult, but not as useful.
Sorry, Councillor Biscoe, thank you. And I think you raised an excellent point. Can I ask the monitoring officer to come in? I've got my own views, but Mel, do you want to comment on this, please?
Just some clarification, really, Chairman. I thought that as a committee we dealt with item 5 and voted on that, and we were now talking about the external audit certification. So my recommendation to members is that we discuss item 6, which is the matter that's under discussion now, which is the external audit certification. We voted on the fees at item 5, Chairman.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure what point you're making. I think Councillor Biscoe is making a very good point, and a very general point. I think what we're being asked to do at item 6, if I can find it in my papers, is note the external audit certification of the financial years. And I think, Paul Dossett was quite right to draw our attention to the fee, because it's a substantial fee and we haven't touched on it. And I think all the GT partner was trying to do was make sure that we didn't blur over it. And I think Councillor Biscoe's comment was simply just, if I can paraphrase you, Bert, would say the fee is reasonable. I think probably somewhere outside of a specific Cornwall Council Audit Committee, there should be a question, having seen what the result of an objection is in terms of fees and costs. And this objection, it arose before I joined the council, was probably quite a reasonable one. I think Councillor Biscoe's concern, certainly my concern, would be if one got a number of frivolous objections that costs a lot of money, what was the best way of approaching it? And I think that's one to deal with or question separately and away from the audit committee. But I see Paul Dossett's got his hand up to speak.
Sorry, Chairman. If you're not going to take it in the audit committee, where do you suggest, or where does somebody suggest it is taken?
So, Councillor Biscoe, I don't think it's an audit committee point. I think it's a very valid point, and I think it is a question that needs to be raised, but it's one that goes way beyond Cornwall Council and way beyond this audit. And in that case, I will come back to the actual recommendation. I think, but if I can phrase it like this, it's a very good point and one that needs to be considered. But can I ask Paul Dossett to come in, because he was waving his hand and it put his comment on this point.
Thank you, Chairman. The point I'd like to say, just so members are fully aware of the broader process here, we get lots of communication from members of the public on lots of matters. The vast majority, we deal with in the way of taking into account as part of our audit. And in the vast majority of cases, none of those lead to any additional work or any additional cost for councils. So that's the majority. And I am very, very conscious about the taxpayers' money, and I will not pursue any frivolous objections and frivolous comments that are not to do with proper questions allowable under the Act, the 2014 Act. There are some, and the Lobo issue, both in Cornwall and around the country, was legitimate in some. I think in some cases it was a bit of a campaigning thing that didn't quite understand. But where the Lobos were complex, exotic, inverse, and there were a number of councils who had those, and Cornwall was one of them, they merited proper scrutiny and governance arrangements being challenged, which is what we've done in this particular case. We would not expect to see a lot of these type of things come up again. I think the council has moved on a long way from the time being when some of these Lobos were taken out, and members will probably recall that some of this is over a decade ago, and this has actually added to the cost of trying to track records down and things like that because of that. So I'm very clear that we focus on where we need to focus. We take on objections that are valid, and they do sometimes incur costs. I'm hopeful we won't get any of this sort of magnitude again in the near future.
Thank you. So Tracy Langley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Paul said there, and largely, if there are any which come into the external auditors that merit some discussion, we have those discussions with them, so we generally know what's going on, and it is the rightful cost of democracy, actually, from my perspective. So it is right that people ask the questions, and it is right that the external auditors audit them.
Okay. If there are no other questions, can we move to the recommendation? I think we've actually got this one right. The recommendation is that the Audit Committee notes the external audit certification of the financial year 2015-16, 2016-17, 2017-18 and 2018-19. May I have a proposer, please? I think Councillor Jordan was first and Councillor Aiken-Smith was second. The proposer and seconder. In which case, Helen, can you deal with the voting, please?
Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Thank you, Chairman. We've got a proposer of Councillor Jordan, seconder Councillor Aiken-Smith. I can confirm that all hands are down. And please, can you now raise your hand if you are for the proposal? Thank you, councillors. I can confirm that's agreed with 9 members voting for the proposal.
Thank you. In which case, according to my computer, it's 3 minutes past 11. If you can leave yourselves logged on, if Councillor Desmond can perhaps try and improve his link because it's a bit weak, and we will reconvene in precisely 10 minutes at 11:13 based upon my computer. Thank you.
Thank you.
to my clock, we've had our 10 minutes. Can we just whiz around very quickly the committee in no particular order and just say, yes, I'm still here, just make sure we haven't lost anybody. In alphabetical order, if I get it right. Bisco, present. It's a good start. It's a great start. Well done.
Desmond, present.
David Eakins,
present.
Who's next on the list?
Chairman, I'll carry on for you. Councillor.
Thank you.
No, Councillor Jordan, are you present?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Councillor Kenny.
Yes, it appeared the live feed was turned off.
No, the live stream was we've carried on as normal, Councillor Kenny. Councillor LeBroy.
Present.
Councillor Woods.
Present.
Mr. Ring.
Present.
And Mr. Butters.
Yes, present.
And do we have Mr. Bisco?
Yes.
Councillor Bisco.
Mr. Bisco's here.
And Councillor Ecclesmith.
I see I've been forgotten again.
Yep.
And Councillor Hurd.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Councillor Hurd. Yes, Chairman, all your members are present.
Thank you. There's obviously some joke about seen and not heard in respect of Councillor Hurd. Never mind. Can we move on to agenda item 7, please, which is the internal audit plan for 2021. I imagine Holly Sykes will present this one, please.
Good morning, everyone. Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit, Risk, Fraud and Insurance. As part of the terms of reference of the Audit Committee, you are asked to approve the internal audit plan for 2021. The audit plan was due to come to the Audit Committee in April, so we have undertaken to start delivery, be it at risk. The plan has also been reviewed by Kate, Tracy and all of CDT. The internal audit plan is put together via a number of inputs, liaising with CDT, reviewing previous audits and making an assessment of the high risk areas, plus many other factors. Since formulating the plan with COVID-19, I've reviewed it again and considered the risk the council face as a consequence and have included an element in respect of this. The audit and fraud team have been agile and refocused their attention to undertake the new work. Their response has been brilliant. I also reviewed the plan to ascertain what could be delivered during the COVID period with access to information and to certain officers limited, so reprioritising that delivery. I've proposed to extend the audit year, so report back to June or July Audit Committee next year on the delivery of the plan to ensure the work can be completed alongside the extra COVID work. This will mean 2 plans cross over, but the team will continue to work in an agile way to deliver this. It's also important to have a flexible approach with the programme as we recover from COVID. The risks that the council faces will likely change, so the assurance delivered will need to adapt. I will keep reviewing the plan to ensure it is appropriate and relevant and amend in liaison with the Audit Committee as required. For any audit that received a limited opinion in 1920, my team will re-perform the audit to ensure the focus is maintained. I also run a programme of reviewing the agreed management actions of other audit work, and the findings from this will continue to be reported to Audit Committee. If you'd like to ask any specific questions, on this meeting is also Gary Walton and Jason Kahn, who are the principal audit managers. So happy to take any questions at this point on the plan.
Jeff Ring is first in the box. Jeff, carry on, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Holly for the report and also to give assurance to the rest of the committee that Holly's approach is the right approach in terms of how internal audit teams are approaching audit planning for this year. So I've looked at quite a few different councils, and in terms of the flexibility needed in the planning process, it's absolutely essential that the team is agile and responds to the key risks which the council's facing around COVID. So I think we've got exactly the right approach that Holly's applying as such. It was just one question around the amount of work that's going to be necessary around looking at COVID risks and the amount of audit work. There's a significant amount of cost, obviously, which has gone out of the door already, significant amount of expenditure which has gone out to businesses. And just to suggest that it may be worth at the back end of this year just having a very specific report around the assurance around the expenditure which has been attached to COVID from an internal audit perspective. Something perhaps at the back end of the year, a very specific report around that to give the committee some assurance may be helpful. That was all then. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I mean, I think that's a very good point. I think if I can not to jump in front of other questioners, but it's relevant on this point of whether, Holly, if you're going to do a decent review of COVID-19 issues, grants, etc., whether taking that into account you have sufficient resources, or whether you need to find a temporary person for 3 or 4 months to give that job the look it deserves. It's a question I'll leave with you.
Okay, again, that's something that I can consider and I can chat with Tracy about. Currently, due to me flexing the year, it looks as though everything is doable, but yes, I'm always reviewing that, and if things do change significantly, I will chat to the Section 151 and then obviously bring it back to the Audit Committee.
I think you would find significant support from this committee if you turned around and said you needed somebody. Okay, if we can move on down the list of crosses. Councillor Kenny?
Yes, I think we would be sympathetic. The question I'm raising is the extended year for the reporting back to the end of June. You will, of course, be dealing with a completely new committee then, because it will be after the elections, and I assume appointment to committee will change anyway. So I don't know if that's going to make any difference to you.
Okay, well, you raise an interesting point, and I think what I would suggest that we do at the April Audit Committee, we will bring a summation of where we are at that point, so that we ensure that you get that appropriate information and understanding of the coverage that's been done.
Yeah, that sounds sensible.
Thank you. The only problem with being chair of these meetings is you get to raise your questions last, and you then find that somebody's raised your questions before you get them in. So thank you, Joanna. Councillor Biscoe?
Chairman, thank you. Could I firstly suggest that for any members of the public who may be observing this meeting, it would be helpful to add surnames for Kate, Tracy, and explain what CDT is? And then my questions are this. Firstly, in terms of conducting an audit review of COVID expenditure, I think there are a couple of points that I would like to ask that you look at. Firstly, it is clear that the government is under the impression that it has specified in terms of reference for monies which it has granted, that there should be an engagement with covering costs on certain matters incurred by parish councils. And there would appear to be some difference of view about how much and to whom that money should be being passed. And I think it's an important question to look at. And then the second one is in terms of grants that we have processed through the council, and I think everybody that I've heard has been extremely praising of the council's conduct of those processes. But one of the issues that's come to my attention is that those grants have got a very strong criteria attached to them, which says that it is the council has the power of discretion, that they are discretionary grants, because the council has got local knowledge and the government was accepting that they would be using discretion in order to make grants where possibly the government's criteria have been quite constrained or constraining. It would be, I think, helpful to look at the degree to which the council has felt confident in exercising that discretion. In my view, it could have used more discretion, or it could have used discretion in a greater number of cases than possibly it has. And I think that in terms of understanding how we, operate in these circumstances, sometimes it's important to be confident and slightly more relaxed, perhaps, when one's got the power to use discretion. So I just think there's an area to look at. I've also received some comments about that as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. So I think Councillor Biscoe on that last point, the discretion point. Of course, not all the grants gave the council discretion. It was just the last bunch. And I'd be intrigued to see whether this is something the internal audit think they can look at, because in the end, what's the appropriate use of discretion? I have issues myself with the way some of these discretions were used. And I see Tracy Langley put the next in the box. I don't know whether Tracy wants to comment on this issue. It could be useful.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're absolutely right. The discretionary part was only in the last tranche. But yes, it'd be very helpful to have a look at that from our own perspective. But just to let you know, councillors, that the government's external auditors are auditing these too. So there is quite a big piece of work being done by the government, because the government want to know that there's been no fraudulent activity in those grants too. So we're kind of, there's three versions of audit. There's the government version of the audit, there's our external auditors version of that audit, and there's also our internal auditing as well. So they are being audited to pieces because it's such a lot of money. But just to give you that confidence.
I would just like to say, Chairman, that I'm not saying that we have misused. I'm not suggesting that we've misused our discretion or overused it. In fact, my view is that we may have underused it and we could have done more.
Yeah. Councillor Biscoe, I say it occasionally, I agree with you.
However, there is guidance. There is guidance in even the discretionary grants.
No, so can we move on from this one before we have an argument about something that's nothing to do with the audit committee whatsoever, and I can argue all day about it. Councillor LeBroy.
Thank you, Chair. Similar but very slightly different. I mean, I agree with Mr. Ring and I agree with Bert. But one of the biggest challenges that Cornwall is going to have into the coming years is to actually face up to the need for economic recovery. And I know that there is an awful lot of work being done in the background on this subject, because we've been the subject of our all-member briefings very recently. But I think this is something which I'd really like to see an eye kept on pretty closely as to what we're actually doing and the interventions that we're planning. So I'd like to see, and I'm not sure I could begin to describe how we go about this, but I'd like to see a piece of work done on this, if that's at all possible. That's number one. And the second one, it comes up a bit later on this agenda, is I've been increasingly worried about the Newton Europe contracts and about the sustainability of the changes and therefore savings made. I think that it's quite possible that some of those contracts might have been written with rose-tinted spectacles on in terms of the longevity of the savings that might be available to the council, and I'd like to see us having a look at that in further detail if at all possible. Thank you.
I wonder if we can ask Holly to comment on both of those quite separately. And the first one is internal audit, looking at the various pots of money we're trying to make available for economic regeneration, etc. I think it's a very good point.
So as part of the plan, we've got a financial sustainability audit, and it might be that we could encompass that within that scope of that work.
Councillor LeBroy.
Yeah, I'm happy to have made those points, and I'm happy if they've been noted and we do see it come back on the table.
Good, thank you. I think if something could be added. And I think on the second point, Holly, Newton Europe, is that not going to come back anyway?
Yes, so due to the level of assurance it was given, it will have to have a full audit undertaken. So we will do that in due course, but also we will ask in the next section when Helen Charlesworth-May covers it, that they return in 6 months' time as well for a review of that as well. So we will keep on top of that over the next year or so.
And I think the very specific question that Peter was raising about the sustainability of what Newton Europe have delivered is a point I think most of us here would probably be very keen on. Okay, next on my list is Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Chair. Could I go to page 119 and the Oracle Cloud business case. I got a few questions on that particular.
Can I interrupt you because we're not on that agenda item yet?
Can you call me back in then when we are? Sorry about that.
Yep, sorry, we're on the internal audit plan. So next on the list, Tracy, you have a cross in the box, but have you in fact spoken?
I have.
Right, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, for the benefit of the minutes, Councillor Chair, and on the point raised by Councillor Biscoe, where you do say the committee is very critical of Cornwall Council, I think it is fair to say that the discretion is based on government rules. As I understand it, there's a lot of work going on to see just how flexible we can make those rules. And obviously for the expressions of interest, we're now going to go back and say, look, you've given us the money. We've got a really good case for people who don't fit the discretionary rules. So I think Cornwall Council is working very hard on that. And I do think the minutes should acknowledge that. The problem is with the government's rules.
Councillor Kenny, I think as I said to Councillor Biscoe, we're liable to bring into this meeting an argument that doesn't belong here, because we really can argue this one all day, and I would quite happily argue it all day. I really don't think it's one for here. And I will acknowledge that there are, various responses to the COVID-19 crisis have been very quick. Some of them have therefore been a bit woolly, but I really don't think it's an argument we want to be having here.
I think it depends what's minuted, Chair.
Then we will have a chance to review and kick at the minutes, but I'm sure the minutes will not be critical of anything. But we will all have a chance to approve them, whatever, next month when we meet again. And sorry, there's a pending question from Councillor Biscoe asking Holly to explain who the infamous Kate, Tracy and CDT are, please.
You make a very good point, Councillor Biscoe. So Tracy is our Section 151 officer, Tracy Langley, and Kate is our Chief Executive, and CDT refers to the directors team, so it makes up all the strategic directors.
Kate, but if I was down, Kate is Kate Canally. Okay, are there any more questions on this issue? No. In that case, can we move to the recommendation? I think the recommendation is clear. Holly, as a result of any of these comments, is there anything you want to change in the plan specifically? I mean, you have said, I think in relation to Councillor Kenny's comment, that you'll bring an interim report back to the March meeting. Whether you want to change your plan specifically for that, or we will just accept that the minutes will reflect that anyway. Does anybody have a particular issue there? Either way? In that case, we'll leave the recommendation as it is. May I have a proposal and a seconder, please? Peter LeDroy was first, and I think Councillor Kenny was just second. Over to you, Helen.
Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Thank you, Chairman. We have a proposer of Councillor LeDroy, seconded Councillor Kenny. I can confirm that all the hands are down. So members, please could you raise your hands if you are for the proposal? Thank you, members. I can confirm that 9 votes have been received for the recommendation. So that's agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, we can move on to the final agenda item, which is the internal audit exceptional report and COVID-19 update. So Holly, I guess you're going to go first. I don't know whether you want to break this into pieces, given that we've got relevant service directors here, etc. So we can look at, I guess, adult social care, with you have 2 exceptional reports there, and then ask Helen Charles with major comment, and then we can let Helen go, and then do Oracle, and then do COVID-19. Would that make sense?
That's absolutely fine. So I'll give a brief introduction from my perspective, and then pass over to Helen, and then to Richard, and then COVID. That's fine. Okay, so Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit, Risk, Fraud and Insurance. In line with internal audit and the audit committee protocols, I'm required to bring limited assurance and high risk audit opinions to your attention. The 3 audits within the report were due to come to the April committee, but due to the postponement, form part of this agenda. I take it that the committee have read the information provided by me on these reports. On this call is the auditor who delivered this work and the officers who have the responsibility for taking forward the management actions. I would request that the officers provide an overview of the work now underway to address the concerns raised in the audits, and that the audit committee request they return in 6 months' time to update you. I'll hand over to Helen Charlesworth-May and then to Richard Williams for them to provide an update to the audit committee, unless there are any questions to me at this point.
No, okay. Helen, will you carry on?
Good morning, councillors. Hopefully you can hear me.
Will you introduce yourself as well?
Yes, of course I will. So I'm Helen Charlesworth-May. I am the Strategic Director for Adult Social Care. So the first thing I want to say is that these audits were requested by the department so that it can begin to properly address the underlying issues affecting performance. In this context, I think it's fair to warn the committee that they can probably expect to see more audits that may have a limited assurance as we try to progress through our improvement journey. This is a really important part of diagnosing what needs to be addressed, being transparent about the issues and the risks that the council faces, and the plan to put it right. But I do need to emphasise that this is not a quick fix, and everyone really needs to be clear on that. The problems we are uncovering date back years, and they will take time to put right. I'm going to start with the Kmenith one, and I think the first thing to say about the Kmenith one is that the closure report that was done of the project by people outside of the department with oversight of the work we were doing, and the audit team both conclude that the project has delivered the savings sufficient to cover the contract value, that's 7.5 million, and savings up to 11.5 million. So nobody is in any disagreement that the Kmenith work delivered the right level of savings. What the project hasn't done is that it hasn't delivered the stretch target of 16.6 million, but the department and the council never included 16 million in its budgeting process, because it always knew that was a stretch, and it always knew that would be probably more than was reasonable and achievable. The audit highlights the difference of the different levels, the differentiation of embedding across the 3 locality areas, and it particularly singles out the fact that the West area was not achieving the level of targets that we would expect. What I can assure councillors of is that the plan we've put in place, which includes the relocation of the management team, of some of the management team from Mid to the West, has already had an impact on performance in the West. So as a very quick indicator, we put in a short-term plan to ensure that we were beginning to see compliance with processes, and the 24-hour compliance measure is now at 89% in the West. We are seeing a reduction in the use of bedded care across the department, but increasingly in the West. And we're seeing the number of assessments. So these are full social care assessments. We're seeing the number of those reduce in line with expectations. Now that is an important measure, because what was happening prior to Kemenic is that people were phoning the assessments team. The assessments team was handing them on to, the access team was handing them on to the assessments team. The assessments team were doing an assessment, and the conversion rate from a full assessment to a package of care was less than 50%. What that means is you are investing lots of effort, time and social work resource in assessing people who are never going to reach the threshold for a service. Since Kemenic, what we have seen is that people phone the access team, and we are now at a point where in excess of 80% of people who phone the access team routinely get referred to non-social care services. The people that get referred on from the access team for an assessment are now more likely to convert to a package of care. So the overall number of assessments has reduced, but the conversion rate from an assessment to a package of care has increased. Those are all good, sound business measures to ensure that you are investing your resource in the right part of the system. And what those business measures are telling me is that the procedures and approaches we adopted through Kemenic are starting to gain traction. The other bit that is really important was around our reablement and step service. And what we have seen with our reablement and step service is an increase in the number of people who were receiving a reablement package over those that had been receiving one prior to the Kemenic project. And that we hit there the 1,000 target. So during 1920, we hit the target of increased 1,000 contacts in the step service. Now, it is my expectation that we will not be hitting that target in the first quarter of this year. And the reason we won't be hitting that target in the first quarter of this year is because the step service have been taken off doing reablement work and were put into our hotels during the period of the COVID pandemic. But what I can say to you is that what that process demonstrates to you is that we have taken informed management decisions with a proper understanding of the consequences, which is not what we would have been able to do in the past. In respect of the process audit, we have long known that we had overly complex processes, but during the first year we didn't treat it as a priority because we were trying to ensure we were embedding Kemenic and doing some of the other savings work. However, and with hindsight, I am very clear with hindsight that was the wrong decision, that we should have tackled processes earlier than we did do. But the reason that we didn't tackle it earlier was because there had been some analysis which demonstrated that tackling business processes wouldn't make any savings because you are simply changing the way that you are doing things. I mean, there are savings to be made there, but not significant savings. However, what has emerged, as councillors will be very clear over the last 12 months, is that the complexity and the lack of compliance with processes in Mosaic had allowed quite large levels of backlogs to build up. And you will know from the Cabinet report last month that at the end of the year, the department had incurred in excess of £12 million worth of expenditure that related to prior years, and that prior year expenditure had not been seen or had been disguised by the complexity of process. So tackling those processes is a really important part of what we need to do as we go into COVID-19 recovery and the improvement process the improvement programme that we will be putting in place shortly. The improvement programme was due to start at the end of last financial year. We have put that on hold because of our COVID response, which for adults has been a whole department response. But we are now coming out of that into initial recovery phase. We are reviewing what we have done through the COVID period because we have implemented some of the changes we would have wished to implement during our improvement programme. So we're having a review as to what's already been implemented and what needs to be reshaped in that programme in the context of what has happened over the last 3 months. I'm not planning to say any more, but very happy to take questions.
Go to questions. I'm sure there'll be a lot, and it's sometimes a shame I go last. Councillor Biscoe.
Chairman, Helen, thank you very much for a very clear report. It's extremely helpful. And what I take from that is that from the audit's point of view, this is a work in progress, and that we need to hold our nerve with it, and as indeed you're indeed holding your nerve, I guess, and that we all need to hold our nerve together. But I just would be, you used a phrase which suddenly leapt out at me, which is that this is in relation to the £12 million overspend last year, that the costs were disguised by the complexity of process. And I was just wondering if you might be able to just expand on that side, maybe give us an example of what you mean.
So we had a set of processes whereby, so in adult social care, somebody gets an assessment, and if they meet the threshold for a service and they have an assessed need for a service, that service is, a package of care is described, and then we go out to the market to commission and purchase that service. What was happening is that people were taking a view on whether or not there were short-term services or whether they were long-term services, and depending on which they were recording them in different ways on the system. Dependent upon which there were different workflow mechanisms within Mosaic that threw up whether or not there needed to be a review. And whether or not a service needed to be changed. And buried within all of that, services that were identified as long-term services would go through process. They'd be, a commitment would be created, bills would be paid, reviews would be timetabled. But if they were short-term services, none of that would be put in place because there was an expectation that it was only for 6 weeks. But there was nothing that alerted people to the ending of the service. But of course, if somebody's been put in a residential care home for 6 weeks, they don't pack up their bags and take themselves home at the end of the 6 weeks. And so we had people who'd originally been brought into the service for 6 weeks, who'd been in the service for not just 6 months, but in some cases 6+ years. And there had been, because the way in which that service had been commissioned, There were then disagreements over what should be paid, what was owed, whether invoices were eligible and due for payment. All of that sort of stuff was not dealt with in a timely fashion. And there were a number of cases, and a number of those cases dated back a number of years. The bulk of previous year's expenditure related to 18-19. It was an accrual in respect of 17-18, but there were also a number of payments dating back a number of years where long-standing disputes with providers that had arisen out of this complexity had not been paid and therefore not recorded in the books at the right time.
Extremely helpful, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? I have a number, Helen. You said that Kenneth has delivered the target, but I'm going to be quite specific here. When I look at this report on the Newton work, just by the by, the £12 million of missing bills that disappeared beneath desks or whatever, was that something Newton found, or was it something we found for ourselves?
So the performance measures and the diagnostic tools that Newton developed for us allowed us to identify the disconnect between activity and money. And we hadn't been routinely able to do that previously.
Okay, thank you. The short answer to that question is yes. What's bothering me is some of the comments in internal audit report. Project closure in March 2020 has been a year late. Potential savings with full and earlier embedding could have been significantly greater in line with diagnostic estimates. My real worry, my real concern is whether we are going to be able to keep the savings that Newton have identified going as we go forward. So that seems to be a real level of question from audit.
So the reason for the delay in signing off, so we had an interim audit done. Chris did an interim audit for us halfway through the programme. I can't remember when precisely, but he did some work for us. And as a result of his work, we identified areas where we were not seeing embedding in the way we would have expected, and we were not seeing performance in the way we were expecting, and we were not seeing the savings. And so what happened at that point was Newton came back and they spent a further number of months going, particularly in the East, where we had identified this failure to embed, going back in and redoing the implementation work. And because they were redoing the implementation work at that point, instead of the project ending, we were expecting it to end in June, July 19, the project ran on for a period at Newton's expense rather than at the council's expense. And I think that's really important, actually, is that when we identified there was a problem, we had the leverage to bring them back in and get them to put it right. Now, clearly, if we delivered all the savings 6 months earlier, we would have had the benefit of that 6 months earlier. But that didn't happen. But what we did do was we took corrective action. And our finance colleagues went all over the figures in real depth to make sure that we could say what we thought the real level of saving was. Now, sustainability is all about the way in which social workers behave when somebody comes through the front door. That is what will drive sustainability. And so that point that I made about what happens when somebody phones us up, do they get referred on to a voluntary sector organisation, or a different part of the system that better meets their needs? Does that happen, or do they get sucked into care? When they have an assessment, are people thinking about what do we need to do to make this person independent, as opposed to what's the service we can prescribe for this person? And those are the measures of sustainability. And that is what will save us, well, that is what's saving us large sums of money. Because what we've got is we've got a number of people in receipt of care. The large proportion of people are in vetted care, and a smaller proportion of people receive care in their home. Our demographic profile tells us that those numbers of people are only going to get bigger. And what Kamenith has tried to do is put in place a set of behaviours with social workers. That means that the first question and first option is not care. The first question and the first option is how can we help this person to be independent and do something else rather than being sucked into care. And that is why the indicators we look at are access, assessment, and overall package of care numbers.
Okay, so guys, go on with a couple of questions. Are you happy with the way the finance guys have measured the savings? And this is an observation or a comment or whatever. With the benefit of hindsight, which is magnificent, would we have been better, and this is before your time as well, Helen, with the deal with Newton, saying to them, right, your contingent fee, you need to deliver the savings for 3 years, and maybe even a bigger contingent fee, rather than, because the worry people have with consultants who come in with a contingent fee, and it's rather flagged up in these papers, is that they come in, they drive it down and drive the savings in the year that earns the fee. They then go away, and this is the worry being raised in the papers, to be fair, and everything drifts back as it was.
And that's an interest. I mean, with hindsight, I'm really clear with hindsight, we would have done the process piece first, because that would have given us a clean baseline. And part of the difficulty we have encountered has been we didn't start with a clean baseline, and as we were doing the Newton piece and then we were doing other work alongside it, it was really problematic to disaggregate the relative elements of that. So I'm really clear with hindsight, we just started in a different place, but as you said, it's great, it's easy to be wise with hindsight. In terms of the Newton were always really clear with us that the stretch target was not something that could be delivered in 1 year. It was something that would build up over 2 or 3 years, because it was about implementing a set of behaviours now and then embedding them over time in the workforce. We are at the moment, we are in the process of going through our budget. We have weekly performance meetings with the activity information that we have built out of the dashboards that Newton did for us, and with the financial input from our finance team, having we've completely restructured our coding so that we now have activity and finance information that matches each other and is aligned to teams doing work, and that will enable us to monitor, are our staff doing the things that Kamenith taught them to do, and is that having the effect that we expect it to have? And if it's not having the effect we expect it to have, what is it that's changing and going wrong? Would having had consultants around for another 2 years made a difference to that? I'm not sure. I think there is a real risk that we become reliant on them. There is a risk that we will lose some of those behaviours. It is my job and the job of my leadership team to make sure that we don't lose those behaviours. So I'm ambivalent about whether contracting with them differently would have made any difference, really.
Let's go with one more question. I see Councillor Kenny's got her hand up as well. In relation to Mosaic, are you suggesting that Mosaic is clumsy and not very good, or are you happy with it? One of your comments as you were speaking earlier was a lack of compliance with processes in Mosaic. And my understanding is that Mosaic is used by children exceptionally well, but there seems to be a real issue being raised here. So is the issue that Mosaic is a problem, or as you said in your words 10-15 minutes ago, that we have an issue with how it is used?
So there are two things I'm going to say. The first is, so Mosaic is very old technology now, and at some point we will inevitably have to look at it, but that's not the issue. The issue is that in adults, so Mosaic it's about a third built when you get it, and then you get to build business processes that you choose to build. We have built a set of very, very complex processes. And the other thing that we have done is that we have built a set of processes. So we've built a set of processes. Something's not quite worked. And so we've built another set of processes around it to try and address the problem that we saw with the first set of processes. Yes. So what we now need to do is we need to step back and say, actually, what is the business process that's right and fit for purpose for the teams? We have overly complex processes and we have multiple layers. And what you will know as well as I know is that the more complicated the controls are that you put in, and the less they reflect the business that you're trying to do, the more likely they are to be avoided. So we have this false sense of reassurance and assurance rather than real risk and control that gives me as the senior leadership team and the senior leadership team assurance, and we don't have the right processes and controls that would give you as audit committee the right assurance. But we are looking at that. That is a really significant piece of work. But I suppose my observation would be it's not a very sexy piece of work. It's really hard. It's really hard grind to get through it, and you don't see the staff on the ground will see benefits, but you don't often see lots of immediate benefits flowing through into your service commissioning or into your budgets. But it is a big piece of work that needs to be done.
Okay, I mean, sorry, I'll stop now. You very carefully put us on warning that we'll be getting more reports that aren't particularly brilliant, and I'll pick my words very carefully here in the future. Separately from this meeting, I think it would be interesting to look at what your scrutiny committee looks at in terms of stuff like this, to make sure there isn't stuff falling through the gap. Right, but Councillor Kenny had a hand up at one stage and has taken it down.
No, sorry, Chair, I don't know how I managed to do that. I've got no questions.
And then Councillor Biscoe is back with the next in the box as well.
Helen, again, thank you very much for your clarity and candour. Just coming back to the point that you made about Mosaic and systems, complex systems, and when you get to a point where with one set of processes that suddenly you find a glitch in it, and so what they've done is built other processes on top of that in order to deal with the glitch. I assume that was because there was always an anxiety that no matter what the problem was, you had to keep the services going because demand is forever persistent and usually growing. And that if you actually stopped the systems, got off and went on, then and fixed it and then went on, you'd have a glitch and you wouldn't be able to be performing well. I mean, this is all assumptions about why people did things in the past. However, the question is this: if from time to time in the conduct of these business, I mean, things change over time, and you know, priorities change, technologies change, and so on. You know, and in those cases, you will from time to time come up against a moment when a series of a systemic process is not the one that you then need, so you have to do something about it. So in order to avoid getting to the point where you end up with incredibly complex systems as the ones you've been describing, where they're actually, you know, unworkable, is there a case, and this is really a question for a future, or it's kind of asking a question about future capital investment, I think. Is there a case for actually saying that there needs to be a backup system so that you've always got the ability, rather like my father's reserve tank in his Daimler Majestic when we were going to, if things got a bit sticky on the road home to the inn, we could always pull the little lever and there'd always be a little petrol in the tank, you know, except when we used to pull it anyway. I just feel that whether there's a case for actually saying that there is a need for a backup system, so that if you get to a point where something does need to be fixed on your main operating system, you can keep going whilst you fix it, so you don't end up in future in these car crashes of complexity, which actually render it very, very difficult and very expensive to go forward.
Yeah, so I've got no idea why we ended up with such a high level of complexity, but we don't need a backup system, because it's absolutely possible to have a backup of the system. And when you do IT system implementations, you tend to build the new business process and the new system offline. You test it to death with data that you've got in your live operational system, so that you make sure that everything's there and it all reconciles. And then you bring the new system and processes on during a period of downtime, which is, you know, a weekend or a night or that sort of thing. And we do that as a council. You know, Richard will probably describe that we did some of that when we went through the Oracle implementation. So all of this is absolutely technically possible. It isn't something that we should treat as special or different. The issue that we need to address is so I don't know why the systems are so complex and convoluted, but what I do know is that as we go through this next 12 months and we start to look at our council-wide business processes, there is a very significant opportunity for rationalisation of business processes within adult social care. Some of that will be specific to adult social care and Mosaic. Some of that will be about adult social care, handing work over to colleagues in other parts of the council and using corporate approaches to things. And all of that is what I would describe as business as usual change.
Okay, Helen, thank you. I mean, I think you've batted a fairly tricky wicket here, if I can mix my metaphors. Tracy's got her hand up to say something, but after that, I think we can probably let you very, very exhaustively go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Say something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to cover off the sort of the technical piece that that Helen was talking about there, and you know, Mosaic is an old piece of infrastructure, on-premise hardware system that most councils use, and Helen is absolutely right. At some point, it will start being not maintained as the people who currently own the system move into, I don't know, some kind of subscription service, which is where they're all going. But until such a time that is, we're left with the system that we've got. And the reason why local authorities they buy these big hairy systems, and we put processes in, and then we reprocess, and they do become really complex. And this is quite an old system now, and that is why we are where we are. And Helen is right. We don't need to take it offline in order to sort out some of the processes. We just need time to sort out the processes, and of course, things change quite quickly. So we are now looking at how we can simplify the processes and make it work much better for adult social care, like it does in children's.
Okay, thank you, Helen. So in that case, can we move on to, I think the next piece was the piece on Oracle. Holly, do you want to say something first?
No, I'm happy to hand straight over to Richard Williams, who is now on screen, if that's okay.
Thank you. Richard, can you just introduce yourself as to who you are and what you do?
Of course, Councillor Harris, and good morning or stroke good afternoon, colleagues, and thank you, Holly. My name's Richard Williams. I'm an interim service director at the council, but for the purposes of today, since April 2019, I've been the senior responsible officer responsible for the delivery of the Oracle Cloud solution and project. If I can make a reasonably short statement, and then of course happy to take questions. I'm going to start with a positive, in that members may or may not be aware that we successfully went live with Oracle Cloud for Cornwall Council in April of this year. I mean, this is a very significant achievement for the council, as it being that it's one of the first large local authorities to have fully implemented Oracle Cloud. The achievement is set against a challenging backdrop that is COVID-19, which meant that the whole project team delivered this remotely in the final weeks before go live. So Oracle Cloud is now the council's core enterprise resource planning, or in the parlance of the industry, ERP system. It is now being used by most managers and staff in the organisation. ERP covers essentially the core support and infrastructure for the organisation. It covers our people and workforce data, personnel information, performance and goals, recruitment, etc. It's also our core finance and procurement system, as well as delivering our core payroll and transactions, so debtors, creditors and so on. And for staff across the organisation, delivers things like expenses and overtime. We have had over 5,000 staff successfully log on to the system since it went live, and the user feedback has generally been very, very positive. Just coming back then, of course, to the matter at hand. When I took over as SRO, I paused the project and I immediately set to reset it in July last year, including the delivery plan to get us to go live in April, new governance and leadership arrangements, and a renegotiated fixed price commercial deal with our implementation partner. And as the audit recognises, from this date, the project has delivered on time and within its reset financial parameters. Please bear with me. But I want to turn, of course, to the conclusions of the audit. And we fully accept the findings of the audits and the lessons to be learned from it. This has been a massive learning exercise for the council, and the thorough and forensic assessment of the project and its associated business case is therefore very timely. Looking ahead, it will be important that the hard lessons learnt from the early phases of the Oracle project reflected as the council continues its digital and technology journey. And in the exchange around Mosaic, we've got an example of where some of that journey will take us in the coming years. So in particular, we are put in place for Oracle, and need to do so for future big technology projects, the assurance of the realism of the business case cost, and importantly, the benefits projections, the importance of good governance and effective project management in these major technology projects, and the need to ensure a sound commercial footing. I also just want to reference members in the summary to the fact that we did have a companion audit undertaken around our readiness to go live with the system, and that did provide reasonable assurance. That's all I wanted to say, Councillor Harris and colleagues and councillors. I'm very happy, of course, to take questions.
Councillor Desmond first, please.
Yeah, hello, Richard. Thank you, Chair. My questions follow on from the previous agenda, as a matter of fact, because underneath the Oracle Cloud Benefits Realisation part of the audit process, there was a plan put forward that there will be a full benefits realisation carried out in late 2020. So following on from that undertaking of a full realisation assessment by audit towards the end of 2020, and setting that as the context for what I wanted to ask you about, it's this. On page 119 of papers under the Oracle Cloud business case, we say that the costs of implementing and operating Oracle Cloud were understated and benefits were overstated. And since July 2019, there is a statement that the risk exposure to the council is high. So I'm assuming that is a current risk item. We are where we are, and you reset everything, as I understand it, in July 2019, rather than, as it says in the paper here, July 2020. And there will have been a contract process put in place to start the Oracle program as a project. What I'd like to know is who wrote the original Oracle specification for the project? What quality assurance methods or procedures were embedded into that contractual relationship? And bearing in mind that this has been something of a fiasco in financial terms until your resetting of the project back in the beginning of this year, is there any clawback provision in the contract with the Oracle arrangement to enable us to recover some of the failings that have arisen from the delivery process? And if there is, have we learned any lessons in terms of whether the correct specification was used? Did we have a fixed price specification, or was it a time and materials specification? There's a series of questions in there, so if you go through that and you haven't answered one of them, I'll just remind you.
I'll do my best, Councillor Desmond. I think, you know, that. So, of course, when I came on board with the council and was asked to look at and take over as SRO for Oracle, I of course looked at the contract under which the project was operating at that time. It was very clear that two things had happened, and I have to emphasise that, you know, I'm not going to be able to do the detail on this because it was before my time. But two things were really clear to me. The first was that an estimate had been given, and which it found its way into the business case, around what those implementation costs would be. But the contract was then drawn up on a time and materials basis, which set out some early deliverables. And then as deliverables were added, then of course change control notices came through. And that's entirely legitimate commercial practice. And so to answer to your question, is there any clawback? No, because whilst we might look at some of the financial escalation, the process for issuing and approving change control notices was in place. So I don't think there is a case for clawback. Of course, in renegotiating the commercial arrangement, I was very keen, and my team was very keen, to move to a more fixed price milestone based contract, which is what we did in the period April to July 2019 during that reset period. And therefore what we did even then, and I think this is probably a fair point to make, is that we included a time and materials element. It was only 10%, so that we could make sure that any unexpected items could be catered for. But the bulk of the deal with our implementation partner, Oracle Consulting, became on a fixed price basis. Does that help to answer your question? Have I forgotten anything?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being so open. I was wondering if the absence of a clawback is a situation that would never arise again in something similar. You talked about the business case having been prepared on the basis of an estimate, dealing with an IT contract, and then giving it, then putting it in as then awarding the contract on the time basis also. That sounds to me absolutely ludicrous. That is giving somebody a blank check based upon a guess, and I find that quite extraordinary. So what I was wondering was whether, when it comes to the proposed review on page 104, looking at the full benefits in 2020, at the end of 2020, whether you could provide to internal audit a commentary on lessons learned. Based upon what you've just said today, it would seem to me that the key lesson here is do not go into such a stupid contract where you guess a price and then you give them a blank check. Let's see if you can give to Holly and her team a lessons learned statement, which she can use as a foundation and her team can use as a foundation to come back with a report at the end of the year to let us know what benefits or negative benefits accrue to this particular project. Is that something you could undertake?
I mean, of course, Councillor Desmond, myself and the team will work very closely, as we have done on this audit, with internal audit. I think it's still in terms of the benefits, it's early days, so we need to allow the system to bed in. The feedback so far is, as I said, very, very strong from users, and it will be in terms of the benefits realisation blended into the work that we're currently doing around the wider transformation of the organisation. But absolutely, if that becomes part of, and I'm asked to contribute to a lessons learned as part of that process, then I'd be delighted to do so.
All right, sorry, Vic.
Just one last point. Do you have quality assurance processes in place now to monitor the performance of this project?
Yes.
And they are quarterly?
No. So there's two elements to this, Councillor Desmond. There is the live operation of the system, and then there is the project. So we are still in project mode, and we're looking to close the project out in the early to mid-autumn. We'll be retiring our on-premise system at that point. There are some external payrolls that we need to deliver and transfer into the cloud over the summer. They're mainly our external paying customers, academies and the like. Once we do that, and as we transition out of project mode, then the quality assurance moves into what we call the business as usual. Whilst we're in project mode, I have a weekly SRO catch up with my core team, and we also run a monthly project board, and we continue to do that. And that provides the assurance to myself as SRO and also to other management of the organisation, Tracy, the CDT and so on, that the project remains on track and that we are moving successfully towards transition to business as usual.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I might be writing a letter as a consequence of all of that. Very, very helpful commentary from Richard. Thank you, sir.
Richard, can I ask you a couple of questions? Back to Philip's lessons learned thing. I would have thought a lesson learned should be dead simple. Never ever sign a time and materials contract with a supplier on anything like IT, because you're always going to get had over. But I'm much more bothered though about some of the comments in the audit report. When you look to the bottom of page 119, there is a risk that the non-financial benefits from adopting Oracle Cloud will not be delivered as the implementation approach is focused on software delivery and not a re-engineering of business processes. And there's further comment over on page 120. It's the same thing, I think, really. The council has not been able to leverage the potential opportunities which arise from cloud to realise process efficiencies. So my concern is we have historically made a mess of, and that's a nice way of putting it, how we paid for this, but that is history. But my real concern is I've got an audit report here saying that having overpaid, been done over, I'll take your pick of your language here, we've got internal audit now saying, as I read it, due to our own failings, we may not be able to get all the benefits of what we've done and paid a fortune for.
Okay, so I'm not sure I entirely agree with that summation of the points made. I mean, you are absolutely right to point out that our focus and our relentless focus, given following the decision to reset that relationship and the approval to move to implementation and continue with the project, was on getting the project over the line. You're absolutely right in that regard. To say that there has been no focus on business process improvement is not right, I don't think. Yes, it hasn't been the overriding focus, but we spent a huge amount of time as a project easing the path of this new system into the user community. So as far as possible, ensure that from day one, users could use it as efficiently as possible. Secondly, it's an absolute from an Oracle, from a cloud-based system like this, that we move away from the heavy bespoking that is characteristic of older generation and on-premise solutions. So the Oracle solution that we had hosted on-premise was heavily customized. So by the very fact of moving to a more generically based cloud system and all the complexities that entails, means that necessarily our business processes have been made more efficient from day one. And then the second point I would say is that as we move forward, now that the system has gone live across Cornwall Council, there is the opportunity to address these points that Audit make around now a focus on business benefits realisation and looking for opportunities to simplify, standardise, modernise business processes through the use of Oracle Cloud and other technology.
So I have a simple follow-on question, which I don't think is capable of being answered today, but needs to be answered. Who is going to monitor that process and show that we are using Oracle to its best? And having done that, to which committee, is it this committee or another committee, will there come a report maybe in 6, even 9 months time to show that we really have got the benefit from it? And just so a couple of little picky points. That's, in fact, deal with that point first. That's the key point here. We've spent a fortune. Who is going to actually monitor and show that the fortune we've spent has ultimately delivered some real benefits?
So I'm not sure I can answer the question today. I think Holly may want to come in on that. She's got a name, and Tracy.
Well, they're all volunteering. Marvellous. Holly.
Hello. So I think it's important to recognise that in Q3/4 we intend to do a benefits realisation piece, and as part of that I'd absolutely expect to see a lessons learned piece within that you would automatically have done that as part of the good governance of a project or a programme. So I think when that audit is done, it will be a really important audit to come back to audit committee, as well as any management actions that we follow up as part of this this review as well. So I think they will be good indicators for the audit committee to understand what has come after all of this.
That's the review. Tracy, if you can answer the first part of the question, we'll all be laughing.
I will try to do that, Chair. I mean, fundamentally, it's me. So I have taken on the mantle of the poison chalice, as you said. However, it is a blooming good system, and we should be able to make it work. You know, and the questions I asked on a daily basis is, what is the standard report? What is the standard process? And we should be matching our standard processes to the system and not the other way around. We shouldn't be matching the system to our processes, which we know are complex. So the answer to your question is it's me, and I will be making sure that we get as many benefits as we can out of this system that we've got in place, which actually is a really good system.
I look forward to reading Holly's report on your implementation.
So do I.
at the March 21 audit meeting.
Oh,
Sorry, one final, really, it's on the tin pot question now. This project has costed a fortune. Its history, I think those who actually signed it off have all gone. If they haven't, they should have, will be my honest view. Just looking, it's talking about there being a shortfall or a pressure, to use that very word, of £2.4 million in 2021, and if I work it out, another million or so the year after. Has that been provided for in the accounts this year? I don't think it has.
Richard, are you going to answer that one?
So there's two elements to that figure. The first is the cost of completing the implementation. Now that's about in the region of 1.4. Now, most of that relates to the core implementation of the project and the milestone nature of the contract that we now have. So we significantly underspent against our financial envelope in 1920, and that creates the pressure of about 800 of that in 2021. And that's because we're withholding and have withheld milestone payments from Oracle Consulting because they were unable to complete some key deliverables and technical deliverables in the background, even though we went live. So therefore, there is still money being held back and therefore needed to be spent in 2021. And I also mentioned some of the aspects that we need to complete. So absolutely that is the case, and Tracy is absolutely fully aware of that. The second element is the fact that cloud licenses just cost you more. Cloud licenses come with them a fuller maintenance package from the provider or hoster, which means that you don't have to do as much on-site maintenance, and that has created a licensing pressure in 2021 and beyond.
Right, you didn't actually answer my question of whether we've actually provided for it in this year's budget.
No.
Thank you. My question was, okay, well, as far as Can we move on to the very final piece of the agenda then? It's still on the same agenda item. And Richard, thank you. I think you can probably disappear into the sun now and whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The very last piece, Appendix 2 to Agenda A, is providing continuous assurance COVID-19. Holly, I think that's you, and then we'll come back and wrap this up very quickly, I hope.
Okay, so Holly Sykes, Head of Internal Audit, Risk, Fraud and Insurance. So I'd like to draw your attention to the COVID-19 audit update, which I've already mentioned. This is in Annex 2, page 122 of your pack. Both the audit and fraud team are delivering work in respect of COVID-19 and have been throughout this period. I intend to provide you with an update in 6 months' time on the results of all this work. So whatever the outcome, whether it's reasonable or limited, we will bring it back because I think it's relevant and significant for you to understand. So you've obviously got it and hopefully read the paper. The work is ongoing and reports are slowly sort of trickling out to be complete. So are there any questions at this point?
Not from me. Anybody else? Right, can we come back to the recommendations on this? And I'm going to suggest an amendment to recommendation 1. The recommendation 1 currently reads that the committee notes the outcomes from the following internal audit reviews and takes assurance from senior management representation on the actions being taken to improve the control and risk environment. I can take, and this is my own personal view, what I would be arguing with again, I'm sure. I can take some assurance from some of the comments. I've got no assurance from Helen, and this isn't necessarily a criticism of Helen, by the way, because as she said, she's warned us, we are liable to get more grief coming back to this committee. So I think to pass a resolution that says I take assurance the representation on actions being taken is just doesn't make sense. I'm less bothered about Oracle, but I am still bothered about our being able to see what actually works within the business and how the processes work. In other words, Tracy doing her job. I would much rather, if I'm harsh about it, change recommendation 1 to read that the committee notes the outcomes from the following internal audit reviews, full stop. Because I've taken a very limited assurance. And Barry Jordan's put a cross in the box to speak. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, the Comeneth, bullet point 2. I was looking at the 2018-19 spreadsheets of Comeneth. Just wondered when the 1920 is going to be available.
So I've lost your point, Barry.
It's on page 109 on recommendation 1, bullet point 2.
Sorry, what are you missing? I'm sorry.
Well, the Comeneth report from Cornwall Council is online for 2018-19. But I wondered when the 1920 was going to be there to compare with.
I have a funny feeling that now we've let Helen go, we can't get an answer. So I think we can. Sorry, Barry. I think we'll have to go ask that question of Helen separately. We let her go. Does anybody else have a comment?
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry, Barry. I'm seeing in the chat box that people can't see. A couple of people agree with my amendment to recommendation 1. Councillor Disco, you've come up on the screen. Do you want to speak?
Yes, please, Chairman. My little X is up there.
Sorry.
That's all right. I disagree with you. I think that the most salient point that Helen made in that regard is that she is currently engaged on a very major piece of work, which is reaching back into layer upon layer of work that has been done in the past, which has increased the complexity of the system she's having to try and understand. So I don't think she's made any secret of the fact that she is conducting a work in progress. and she described it as such. So, and she did say to us that we would be receiving reports, update reports, which would still be painting a difficult picture going forward. But the work needs to be done in order to get to the point where we can actually have everything in a robust and resilient position for the future. So to me, there's no point in removing the second part of the recommendation, because actually I take the view that if she's come to tell us that actually she's part way through the work is ongoing, the work is on time, it's being done in a timely way, and that the outcomes are moving towards, the interim outcomes are moving towards a stronger situation in the future, then I think we should take assurance from that. I don't doubt Helen's word. I certainly don't doubt her competence, and I don't doubt her candour in terms of coming forward to the committee. So I'm afraid I can't support your removal of that second part of the sentence in recommendation 1.
So, Councillor Kenny?
Can I suggest a compromise? If we say take some assurance, because I agree with what Councillor Biscoe is saying. It just seems to me simpler to just stop the full stop as soon as we can. But I think a good compromise will say some assurance, because obviously we're not full assurance, because the next recommendation is we get another report back. So can I suggest putting in summon?
Councillor Desmond wants to speak as well before I respond to you.
Yes, Chair, thanks for that. I can't support the comment from Councillor Biscoe. I think you're right. The wording is not appropriate. I certainly didn't come away with assurance, certainly not on Oracle. We're being told there's going to be lessons learned. There's similarly quality reports to be issued. There's in the previous agenda, we hear that there's going to be reviews issued by the end of this year on Oracle, and I think the similar sort of comment applies to the reports we've had on our adult social care. I think all the officers' information given is clear, it's transparent, it's quite robust, but it doesn't give us a sign-off, it doesn't give us assurances. So I would support the point that we should take out assurances. I think Councillor Kenny's suggestion has some merit to it. I might use the word limited assurance, but I think we need to be quite clear that we are not satisfied with what's been said in terms of an assurance. What we've been left with is a lot of unassured positions still to be closed off.
Can I sum this up? And on a roasting afternoon, sitting in a little box of a room, I would be quite happy to change recommendation 1 to say and take some assurance. I think our concerns as a committee have been well made. I think changing the recommendation to say it takes some assurance is making the point in writing. And I would be, I don't know if I'm allowed to propose a change to the recommendations, Helen, or that will need somebody else to do it.
Seconded.
There we are. Helen, do you want to do whatever necessary?
Yes, thank you. Helen Snell, Democratic Services. Thank you, Chairman. So for the recommendation, which starts on the bottom of page 109 for agenda item 8, to confirm, the second half of the sentence is going to say that the committee takes some assurance rather than takes assurance. So based on that, please, I can confirm that all members' hands are down. Could I have a hand up for a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Biscoe. And a seconder? That's Councillor Wood. Thank you. Can I ask you both to put your hands down? And now to go to the vote, please. If you could put your hand up if you are for the proposal. So that's Councillor Kenny, Councillor Jordan, Councillor LeBroy, Councillor Biscoe, Councillor Harris, Councillor Desmond, Councillor Ecclesmith, Councillor Bird and Councillor Wood. Thank you, members. That was carried. 9 councillors have voted for the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you, which leaves us with agenda item number 9, any other business that the chairman considers to be of urgency. To remind you that we have another audit meeting sometime next month, and beyond that, in my opinion, the only urgent thing is for those of us who put a shirt and tie on to take them off and go and find a cold drink. So I will thank you all for your attendance today and close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Helen.
Right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chairman. Much appreciated. Bye for now.